When people told Reddit their past, their stories, explained themselves with Reddit stories, foretold the future. Not really. But foretold the future with Reddit stories. The best place by the monitor was kept for the Reddit teller. Welcome back to your cozy spot by the screen light. Today, I have some new tales to impart with some interesting outcomes. We've all made mistakes, right? Not me, of course. No, I'm damn near perfect. What are you looking at? You don't know anything. You shut your goddamn mouth, you son of a... Moving along. We can't all be perfect. Sometimes we mess up, not me, and that is okay. Especially because I can tell all of you on how today I messed up. Now, I don't know about you guys, but me, I'm a fruit guy. You know, I like pineapples, mangoes, watermelon, grapes, strawberries, you name it. I like fruit. I'm sure that a lot of you do. But I draw the line. At some points, no, not a grapefruit. I don't like grapefruit, but I wouldn't draw the line, no. Now, those stupid green melons, you know, the ones where you buy melons at a market, and you just really wanted the watermelon, but they sell that mix, and you just wanted the watermelon or the grapes, and they give you those nasty orange and yellow and green. Anyway, no, I like fruit, but not as much as this guy. You see, this story stems from someone known as Coconut Throwaway 69. And the story is titled, Today I effed up by nutting into a coconut. Now, this Today I effed up didn't happen today, but quite a few years back. For obvious reasons, I'm using a throwaway account, as my family knows my main Reddit username. Anyway, around 8 years back, I lived in northern Mozambique, a coastal southern African country with quite a warm climate. My mother at the time was going through a health nut, no pun intended, phase, and only buying foods she deemed healthy enough. One of them was coconuts. She would buy several coconuts a week to use in food from the local market. Anyway, being a frisky, horny teenager, I fapped in regular intervals. Unfortunately, there were several stressful examinations coming up for me, and as such, my glorified touching time reached a higher peak than usual, and I was feeling pretty sexually frustrated. One day, I hear that my mother is going to be out for pretty much the entire afternoon. Well, thorny little me decides that it would be a fantastic idea to screw a coconut. Honestly, to this day, I can't fathom why I thought this would be a really good idea. But my train of thought back then was clearly somewhat clogged. I end up grabbing the coconut drill, and through 20-ish minutes of concerted effort, ended up creating a hole large enough for me to stick my poker into. I decided it required some lube. And, because of that, I went and grabbed the nearest slippery thing. Butter. Before shoving it into the coconut, followed shortly by my schmeat. I made love to that coconut, and it actually felt pretty damn good. So, I blew my load. I shoved the coconut under my bed and continued about my day. For the next week, the coconut is my Lord and Savior. Whenever I want to get off, I simply take it out and yuck it in its delightfully tight hole that I made better each time by accumulating volumes of my semen and butter acting as lubricant. It's heaven. Now, before I continue, I'd best mention that at the time, our area was experiencing quite humid, muggy weather, which exacerbated an already existing fly problem. Disgustingly fat, bloated flies were commonly found around our house, and the exterminators couldn't really do anything because it was a localized area problem that would go away in the winter. About a week and a bit after the initial coconut yuck, I had been using it pretty much every day since then, by the way. I begin to notice a few more flies, more than usual, as well as an odd, unpleasant smell about my room. It must be the coconut, right? So I decide I'll give it one more good yuck once more before I throw it out and get a new one. The worst mistake I have ever made. You see, the reason for the increased number of flies was that the coconut was evidently, in hindsight, a nearly perfect place to lay eggs. As I penetrate the coconut one last time, I begin to feel a strange wriggling sensation. Puzzled, I pull my wee-wee out to discover that it is covered in rotted and moldy butter and semen and teeming with tiny yucking maggots. They were wriggling all over my wiener, and some were even trying to force their way up my urethra. Well, I screamed and threw the coconut against the wall, which made the situation... Oh, I have to read that. Fuck. I screamed and threw the coconut against the wall, which made the whole situation worse by spilling the contents. Hours of vigorous yucking, only to follow with hours of vomiting and cleaning the remnants, were spent reflecting on just what the hell I was doing with my life. Never again. Never, ever, ever again. Don't yuck a coconut. Don't. I just need for some of the listeners to understand how hard it is sometimes to read these stories. One, because I have to do it and think of a word that doesn't, get me struck or anything like that, because sometimes they do. But also because I have to read a story like that and try to be straight-faced. And it's really hard. Not as hard as this guy was with that coconut, but it was hard. And I agree with one comment over here. Elvin Star 32. I get that your horny little brain made you think that yucking a coconut was a great idea. That's not even what surprises me. You see, but what your brain is supposed to do is return to normal, after you blow, you load. So why did your normal brain tell you it's fine to leave an open coconut in a warm room with semen and butter in it? And most importantly, how are you not disgusted at the idea of using several day-old semen as lubricant? That's what I want to know. I agree. Moving along and pointing out just how perfect I am and how it seems that you guys just have constant mess-ups. This story comes from Dr. McSinister, titled, "Today I effed up by stuffing my face with edibles before dinner with my wife's parents." Recently, I traveled to Denver, Colorado, in case you didn't know, with my wife and my wife's parents. As a resident of a non legalized state and as someone who is too much of a wimp to regularly buy illegal drugs, the thing I was looking forward to the most was a chance to buy fancy legal weed. What could possibly go wrong? So, the first thing I did upon arriving and after successfully ditching the in laws is drag my wife to a nearby dispensary for a shopping spree. And oh my God, it was just like my dreams. Tons and tons of different options in neat little sample jars, and a team of helpful stoners walking me through the various strains. Are you looking for a mellow body high, or do you want something that just gives you a bit more pep and energy? Or are you just hoping for something light to take the stress off? Yes, and yes, 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 I reply eagerly. I'm like a fat kid in a candy store and request an 1/8-ounce bottle, about 7 different options. In hindsight, if I learned anything from this experience, it's that my math and science teachers never taught me basic information, like what is an ounce, or how much weed can a person consume in a single weekend. Sure, I can tell you when 2 speeding trains leaving separate stations will collide or recite Avogadro's number. But it turns out that none of that information is particularly relevant to getting high in a responsible and efficient manner. And it was at this dispensary that I also learned that you can't actually smoke in public places, including the hotel that my wife and I were staying at. And as a result, before leaving, I begged my wife to buy some edibles that I could munch on until we found a place to properly get lit. After expressing shock as to the absurd volume of drugs that we were buying, unlike me, she is the product of private school and understands the imperial measurement system, she relents, and we walk out of the store with what felt like a dump truck of weed, plus a small package of seemingly innocuous ginger snap cookies. When we finally get back into the hotel room, I tore those bad boys open, only to find about a dozen tiny cookies roughly the size of a quarter. What the yuck, Denver? Seeing the skepticism and hunger in my eyes, my wife warns me that I should go easy and look at the back of the package before trying one. Dose size, 1/2 cookie, I read silently. And as I start taking micro bites from the edges like a giant chinchilla gnawing on a sunflower seed. But what kind of a savage only eats half a cookie? So a second later, I covertly pop the remainder into my mouth. Ah, Metal Gear. And then I quickly stuff another 2 cookies in my mouth for good measure, the moment my wife turns her back. We may not have legal weed back at home, but I routinely devour an entire package of Milanos in one sitting without breaking a sweat. Your move, tiny ginger snaps. About 30 minutes later, we're in the backseat of her parents' rental car on the way to dinner. And that's when things start to, well, go bottoms up. My stomach growls, loudly and angrily. My wife looks at me with inquisitive eyes that seem to say, diarrhea? But I merely clutch my tummy and mumble something about altitude sickness. You didn't eat a whole cookie, did you? She asks. 10% in genuine concern and 90% in seething irritation. Of course not, I respond, avoiding eye contact for the remainder of the car ride. A few minutes later, we are climbing out of her parents' rental car and heading into some trendy farm-to-table restaurant. I don't remember how I made it to my seat, and I don't even remember looking at the menu. But I do remember the concerned look on the waiter's face as he asked me if I was doing all right. Keep it together, man. Keep it together, I say to myself, but my wife's sudden groan suggests that I may have also said that to the waiter. Things are going downhill fast. The waiter nods sympathetically, takes our orders, and then heads to the next table. The moment he walks away, my wife is staring daggers at me. I start to worry that the jig is up. You are sweating from your entire face, she says with both pity and disgust. Not quite knowing what to do, I reach for my napkin and proceed to blot my cheeks, nose, neck, chin, and forehead. At this point, my wife's mom looks over at me with some concern. Are you doing all right? She asks kindly. Yeah, the food, just a bit spicy, I reply, far too quick to realize that we had literally just ordered and that there was nothing on the table except for a basket of dinner rolls. My wife kicks me under the table to grab my attention. Bathroom, now, she hisses. Get it together. I reluctantly get up from the table and head for the toilet. After splashing several handfuls of water in my face, I approach a urinal and start to pee. Now, one of the more disconcerting effects of those tiny ginger snap monsters is the feeling that time has become untethered from reality. As I'm peeing, I start to get the very unsettling feeling that I have been taking a piss for the better part of an hour, and that my wife must be pacing around the restaurant worried about me. But deep down, I know that this is absurd. I've been peeing all my life, sometimes multiple times a day. I've probably taken more than 50,000 leaks, and it usually only takes about a minute at most. So, given that my typical pee is no more than 60 seconds, and given that it feels like I'm about halfway done, that means that I've probably only been standing here for about 30 seconds. Right? But the guy at the urinal next to me doesn't respond, and instead starts shuffling away from me midstream, like a startled penguin. I try, albeit unsuccessfully, to break eye contact. After finally finishing, I again splash some water on my face and return to my seat, making sure to apologize to the table for being gone for such a long time, just in case my math was off. Next, I try briefly to engage in small talk with my wife's father, but I am far too high to understand what either of us are saying. Not wanting to start laughing uncontrollably at the wrong moment, or really at any moment, I figure the safest idea is to nod my head periodically and drink a ton of water. Nothing cures mental fatigue like water, right? To my wife's horror, I stand up, grab my water glass, and thrust it out to the waiter, who unfortunately is on the opposite side of the restaurant. But he turns out to be really cool, and after making his way over to our table, tells me that he'll do his best to keep me stocked with ice water for the rest of the meal. He also helpfully suggests that if the dinner rolls aren't too spicy for me, I should probably eat one or two so that I'm not sitting there on an empty stomach. Smart man. However, after going through all of the bread on the table and 3 glasses of water, I start to get worried that I need actual food to offset the growing paranoia from those tiny ginger snap devils. Do you think I should flag down the waiter again and ask what's so, taking so long? I suggest helpfully to my wife. What? We literally ordered 3 freaking minutes ago. And at that exchange, my wife loses her cool. How many cookies did you eat? She demands. Whoa! Easy there, Torquemada, I respond, somewhat horrified at her outburst. I had a few cookies, but keep it down. I don't want your parents to know how freaking messed up I am right now. Really? They're sitting 2 feet away from you. They know. I look up for the first time, notice both of my in-laws just staring at me for what literally felt like an eternity. As for part 2 of the story, there's a reason, or technically 3 delicious reasons as to why it was cut short. At that point, my wife's singular focus was on getting me out of the restaurant before I either puked all over the table or pissed myself, or an unsightly combination of both. So, after a few spastic two-handed waves goodbye to my in-laws, she rushed me to the door like a Secret Service agent evacuating the president. My night after that was a whirlwind of barfing and groveling, mixed with a few vain attempts at getting handsy back in the hotel room. But before or during the absolute awesome sweetie that she is, my wife stuck with me through the whole nightmare, whispering over and over in my ear, "Please don't die. We have a mortgage." Thank you for joining me by the monitor. And to everyone listening and enjoying this content, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe to hear more of these stories stemming from tragic to comedic to downright horrific. And as always, see you in the next chapter.